following sermon was delivered at the 10:30 worship service at the United Methodist Church of Kent. Please enjoy.
I've been noticing the daffodils recently. Perhaps you have been too. Actually, more accurately, I've been learning from and being encouraged by the daffodils recently. Last fall, my mother gave us a few dozen daffodil bulbs from her garden, the home where I grew up. We planted them all around our yard here in Kent, the front, the back, the sides, some out in the yard, some up in the flower beds. Now this spring, some of them didn't come up. I assume perhaps they became snacks for our squirrels. Others did come up, but only their leaves. They never formed their flowers. Still others came up and rather curiously bloomed as hyacinths. Apparently, I can't tell the difference between their bulbs. And still others came up and bloomed as beautiful daffodils, white flowers, yellow flowers, some a mixture of both. I've been so grateful for the presence of those daffodils, especially here in the early spring, with our temperatures going up and then up and down a few more times, with the rain and then the dry and then the snow, and seemingly going around and around again. I grew up hearing a saying that it snows 3 times on the daffodils, and more years than not that seems to be true. And yet the daffodils, for their part, hardly seem to mind at all. Their strength, it appears to me, is in their flexibility, in their ability to bend without breaking. The snow weighs down on top of their flowers, bending them to the ground, but as that snow melts, they stand back up again, bearing witness to the warmer temperatures and the abundance of flowers that are soon to come. And eventually, when their flowers fade, as early spring turns to later spring and other flowers will take their place, daffodils' leaves remain, receiving nourishment from the sun, storing that nourishment deep in their bulbs to form next year's flowers. Daffodils display this beautiful resilience to endure and to keep blooming. Not just to survive, but really to thrive in this in-between season on the edge of warmer days. During the cold, gray days of early spring, amid the wind and the rain and the snow, their bright white and yellow flowers resemble the sunnier days they anticipate. And I keep thinking, as I notice them this year, as I give thanks for those daffodils, I keep thinking that I want faith. I want love. I want life like that. To withstand the cold winds of life and keep standing. To bend without breaking beneath the weight of loss and fear. And to be able to bounce back and to bear witness to the warmth and goodness that are coming. I want faith, love, and life like the daffodils and like the women in our Easter gospel. It was very early in the morning on the first day of the week when the women went to the tomb to care for Jesus' dead body, we're told. And so Easter, we remember, begins in death, and with the women faithfully keeping their vigil, vigilant during painful realities. They had no strong belief in resurrection, no reason to expect anything but death. They were going to a tomb, after all, and recent days had been horrific. Their vigil had begun with Jesus hanging on a cross, being stretched to suffocation on the empire's lynching tree. While his agony was so intense it must have seemed unbearable to watch, still the women bore its weight. They stayed with him. They remained with him, observing these things, while all the others turned away. They kept their vigil while Jesus' body was laid in the tomb. And they came back to that tomb, waiting to care for his body in the rituals prescribed by their tradition. Jesus' body deserved to be washed, anointed, and wrapped in new linen by loving hands, and yet they had no expectation that they'd be able to do so. They knew the Romans wouldn't let them anywhere near the tomb, that the priests' guards would oppose their approach, and they had seen the large stone covering the entrance to the tomb, the finality, the permanence of their loss. If ever there was a dead end, this was it. And yet somehow, by grace I suspect, somehow the women didn't stay away. They didn't say, oh, well, we can't do anything about it. It is what it is. Let's just stay with the men hidden away. Maybe the danger will pass by us eventually. No, instead, Instead, they kept their vigil. They came to the tomb bringing and offering freely what they had, undeterred by the darkness before dawn, unbroken by the weight of the grief they carried. They stayed with Jesus at the tomb. And we remember they were alone as they did this. This vigil was left to the women alone. For all the men who had lived with Jesus throughout his whole public ministry, they had all run away. Peter, Andrew, James, and John, whom Jesus had called from their fishing nets, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, another James, Simon the revolutionary, Judas and Judas Iscariot, every single one of them who had been called by Jesus and sent by Jesus, who had followed Jesus throughout the past few years, here at the end, they all ran away. Only the women stayed, vigilant like daffodils under the weight of snow, persistent, refusing to abandon Jesus, even his dead body. What must they have thought as they kept their vigil in darkness? What must they have felt as they waited for dawn to break, with their hearts already broken, having lost the one who gave them life, the one who healed them and brought them into beloved community, the one who offered them hope that never runs out? With that hope, however little of it remained, they waited for some small miracle that would allow them to care for Jesus' body and to offer what they could. But when they arrived at the tomb, they found the stone rolled away and the body of Jesus missing. Suddenly, two glowing beings appeared. The women, bent by their fear like daffodils by the snow, bowed their faces to the ground. "Why do you look for the living among the dead?" God's messengers asked the women. "He is not here, but has been raised. Remember what he told you." Then the gospel tells us they remembered his words. And remembering, it was like warm sunlight breaking through the clouds, melting some of the weight from on top of them. The women stood up and went to share this miracle beyond all hoping, this resurrection beyond all reason, with the men who had run away. And their words, we are told, struck the men as nonsense, and they didn't believe the women. The first Easter sermon, perhaps like this one, the first Easter sermon preached by Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary and the other women, the first Easter sermon was dismissed as utter nonsense. Peter ran to the tomb, saw that it was empty, and returned home, wondering what had happened. For he remained convinced that Jesus had died, that death had won out, that love had lost in the end. But not the women. No, the women remembered Jesus' words, and they understood that through resurrection, a whole new world is begun. Through crucifixion, God has joined all of our suffering, all our pain and heartbreak and loss and grief and hurt, all our violence and exclusion and fear. And now, through resurrection, God has made a way through it, not around it, but through it, through death, where Easter begins, into fuller, more abundant life. And through the women, now we are given our example, our model for Easter living. Like daffodils in early spring, staying vigilant when the world is cold and confining, observing, not ignoring, not escaping or running away from, but observing, joining the suffering of the world, and then offering, like the women bringing their spices to the tomb, freely giving whatever we can, and continually remembering Jesus' words, all those staggering descriptions of beloved community. That's how we move from just celebrating Easter to living it. Like the women, even when it seems like nonsense, showing through the shape of our lives that resurrection really matters, not just for us, but for the whole creation. That death is not the last word, and fear is not the last word, and violence and hatred and exclusion and attempts to erase whole people, these are not the last words either, and never will be. None of that will be our end. For the stone is rolled away, the sun is shining, and a more beloved community is being born. So by God's grace, may our words, may our actions, may our whole lives resemble it, the beloved community we anticipate. For Christ is risen. Christ is risen indeed. Alleluia. Amen.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the United Methodist Church of Kent Sermon Podcast. For more information about the church, visit www.kentmethodist.org.